In 1738, a prominent businessman, 35-year-old Alfred Smith, had an enormous home built for his soon-to-be bride, 19-year-old Pride Ashford. The one thing that Pride requested was that the large stairway leading up to the second story would have owls carved into the walnut staircase on either side of the landing. Mr. Smith wanted to make sure his new bride was as happy as he could make her, so he commissioned the work to be done in Italy by a well-known sculptor. It took over a year to complete, and during that time, the sculptor became very ill and eventually went insane. However, the finished product was magnificent. The two owls stood majestically facing every visitor who entered the home. They each stood approximately 2 feet in height and were 9 inches in width. He instructed his staff that they must be polished every day. 3 years and 2 children after the marriage of Alfred and Pride Smith, Pride became very ill. She spent most of the days in her bedroom upstairs. Alfred fretted and paced for many hours each night, looking at the owls that Pride loved so much. One evening, Alfred was in the drawing room and he heard Pride calling out for him. He ran out just in time to see her standing weakly at the top of the stairs. "Alfred, I need to see the children," she cried, and as he made his way to the bottom of the stairs, Pride took a step and tumbled like a rag doll down the entire length of the massive staircase and brutally hit her head on the tail of the carved owl that she loved so much, killing her immediately. The blood flowed across the entryway, and as Alfred held his wife, he began screaming for help to try and come save her. Some time after that, a grieving Alfred shot himself at the stairway landing next to his wife's beloved owls. Years later, the home was purchased by a wealthy gambler, James Conroe, and his family, which included his wife Betsy and their 5 children. James Conroe was a well-known man of drink who would become quite volatile. He was also a philanderer who enjoyed the company of many women other than his wife. There were many confrontations in the home's doorway between Betsy and these women, and also between James and the men he'd occasionally lose large sums of money to. On one dark and rainy night, James Conroe grabbed his children's nanny around the waist, his breath vile from booze and cigars. The nanny shoved him away, and in retaliation he grabbed her by the hair and hit her face against the carved wooden owl as hard as he could several times. The nanny perished right there on the bottom of the stairs, as did James when his wife saw this happening and shot him from the top of the stair. Blood dripped off the owl's carved feathers. Many, many years later, the home was remodeled into an insane asylum, the Pride Smith Hospital for the Criminally Insane. The home housed murderers and psychopaths. It held those which some accused of being possessed by demons themselves. There were 15 residents on the night of January 17, 1975, when the lights to the building went out due to a storm. As a doctor and nurses worked to secure the patients, a candy striper was sent to gather candles. By the time the lights came back on, serial killer Lane Kent Nichols was missing, as was the candy striper. However, the two were quickly found at the bottom of the stairs. The young woman was tied to the post, the owl above her. As Lang waited for the doctor and nurses to gather, he began to slowly cut the woman's throat, and with the gaping wound, her head fell backwards and rested at the feet of the carved owl. For decades to come, the house sat empty. The two owls stood silently and majestically, exactly the same for decades upon decades. In 1998, a man bought the home as a surprise for his wife. He completely had it restored to its former glory, and it was stunning. The floors were once again their wooden glory, and the windows sparkled in the sunlight. The stairway was grand and welcoming, the rails polished and dark. When he put the blindfold over his wife's eyes, he walked her inside and gently removed it. And when she opened her eyes, she was in love with it. except for one thing. She turned to her husband and said, "The owls?" And he explained their ornate history of true love, from the original owner to his wife. But she wasn't as taken as her husband was with the story when she replied, "They give me a bad feeling. They seem creepy." Then he whisked her off to the grand, formal living room, and as he did, the eyes of those owls turned to watch her, knowing that she wouldn't be here long.